but is like, should you be going to these things? Should you be finding conferences and networking events in your niche, in your world? Be that band meetups, be that trade shows with just a bunch of gear to look at and drool over, or instrument workshops, stuff like that. I would venture to guess that every person at this table would say hell yes, probably, in different words. But
Definitely.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go.
So, Manel, now it's time to reverse the whole thing. And now you are doing the hello and welcome.
Oh, really?
Yes, you do.
Oh my god.
You practiced for 3 days.
You know, I dreamed about this. Yeah, it's nothing, but it's true.
Was
Really?
it like a good dream or
a nightmare.
What was the dream about?
About me being in a podcast. Like,
Oh yeah, it will happen soon.
I mean, it's
Very
happening.
soon.
Yeah, you're right. We're doing thinking about that.
Hello and welcome to the self-recording table. I'm here with Benedikt, Malcom Owenflot, and Thomas Krottenthaler.
hello everyone?
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. Thank you for listening again. We are here at the table in our Airbnb, and the Studioszene event 2024 has just ended. Oh,
We do have a camera.
We do have a camera.
Hi,
Hello.
everyone.
I forgot about that twice now. So hello, we're here at the table at the Airbnb. Studioszene is over. We had a good time there. 3 days, pretty like full days. It felt like it went by really
Busy.
quickly. A lot of busy days, yeah. And yeah, it's not just me, of course, and not just Malcolm. There's Manel and Thomas, and we did it together. And yeah, I don't even know what to say. It was a great 4 days, and we're trying to, or 3 days, and we're trying to recap now. And I'd like to get your thoughts, honestly, on the whole thing, because I was in the middle of it, and all of that. I said a lot about it already, but like, I'd like to hear what you guys thought.
Let's quickly give these two an intro for people that haven't heard them on or about
Oh,
them
yeah.
on the podcast.
You're
before.
absolutely right. So Manel is, and maybe you can cut that together a little bit. Maybe not. I don't know.
I'll do whatever I want.
You can do whatever you want. I told you at the beginning of these 3 days you could do whatever you want. So yeah, you're totally right. You might be familiar with the name Thomas because he was on the podcast before, and he's been working with me at the studio for a while now. He's done a course for the self-recording band on editing drums. He's done playbooks for the self-recording band syndicate, the coaching program. And so he's an absolutely important and like, not just important, he's a crucial part of the Outback Recordings and self-recording band thing that I'm doing. And here at the Studioszene, Thomas was doing filming and content stuff, basically.
Also driving cars in emergency situations.
Also saved the day today, totally. We would have been late to our first talk today if it wouldn't have been for Thomas saving the situation, taking over the car, finding a parking lot while we were sprinting to the stage. So thank you, Thomas, for everything.
Thank
Once
you,
again.
Benedikt. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And then that is Manel. Manel has been a student in the self-recording syndicate, or he still is, but he's also a really, really great engineer, producer, musician, and now part of the team self-recording band because he's editing this podcast. He's been doing that for, I don't know, 5 episodes, 6 episodes, maybe more than that. 10?
I don't know.
Something like that. The last couple of episodes. And you're doing a killer job. And Manel also filmed, came up with cool content ideas, took over my social media, the self-recording band social media for a couple of days. And so, yeah, thank you as well for doing all of
Very,
that.
very welcome.
And you of course know my friend and co-host Malcom Owenflot that
everyone.
I'm doing this with. He's been doing talks with me and podcasts and reels, came up with a bunch of ideas. The whole us capturing content part of it would not have happened without Malcolm, Manel, and Thomas, because I'm the person with the least knowledge about video and all that kind of stuff, and it's also hard for me to focus on everything at once. So thank you guys. We wouldn't have any footage without you.
Yeah, so unpacking Studioszene. What was everybody's favorite part? Favorite speaker, favorite workshop? Because that was, if you don't know what Studioszene is, it's a super cool conference. There's a bunch of great guests, ourselves included, giving like workshops, talks, master classes. There was live podcast episodes, which you will of course hear on this podcast channel. And yeah, it was pretty fun. There's a lot of interesting people, a lot of talented people doing some really impressive work, and getting to watch how they do it, pick their brain on how they do it. It's pretty fun. So, Manel, you want to start it?
Yeah, I would say that of course we've seen a lot of like interesting things, interesting gear and all that. But for me, like the most interesting thing is this team. Like I think I've met a bunch of really nice people, and I've felt very, very welcomed from the very beginning. I didn't expect anything else, to be honest, but yeah, and just hanging out with professionals like you, it's been very, very interesting to me.
That's nice,
Yeah.
man. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I remember you saying at some point, imagine like getting out of the car and then figuring out that you like don't like the people. something like that was what
Yeah.
you said. And like you're so glad that it's not like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could happen, but yeah.
Yeah, listeners, if you're not aware, this is the first time the four of us have been in the same place.
Oh,
True.
yeah. That's right.
It's true.
So it was a bit of an experiment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it worked out really well.
Totally.
So yeah, that's the most important thing for me.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
What about you, Thomas?
For me, this whole event is just, it's so good to meet people that are in the same scene as you. It's called Studioszene, and you meet people that kind of are like you but have different opinions on different things, and you learn a lot just by talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
And that you can't do that at home, and that's just to have that different angles and different views of people. That's just so valuable to me,
Yeah.
personally.
Cool.
And especially today, I visited the masterclass of, what's it called, Henning Verlage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is he from the Netherlands?
I think he's German, but I might be wrong.
I don't know this name. Sounds
No, I think he's German.
German. And he explained a lot of things I do constantly in the studio, like programming drums, reamping bass, things like that. And it was very interesting to get his kind of view, because he's done a lot of things way different than I do them,
Right.
but had kind of the same reasons for it. And this just opened my mind,
New possibilities.
Yeah.
Cool.
And things like that are just, you can't get them at home. in
Yeah.
Your home studio, basically. That's, to me, the most valuable thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
For me, it was Warren Hewitt's masterclass was super fun to me. He really just he unpacked this super cool sounding song. I actually don't know what that song was, but it sounded great. I want to listen to more of it. But it was the point he was making was how if you get it right with a good band in a studio playing the song together, you don't have to do like anything. It just sounded mixed, like clicking play, faders at 0, no plugins. And it really did. It was like, of course, we're going to put a little bit of reverb on the vocal, or a lot actually.
Yeah.
But you didn't need it to.
No.
It was like that makes it sound like Motown kind of thing, adding this big plate. But a little, like when he had that, he shot out a couple reverbs, and that smaller room reverb, I actually really liked
Me
that
too.
vibe. I was like, oh, I'm into this. Let's keep going here.
The Sunset Sound Room, I think, was
Yeah,
it?
exactly. Yeah. Which funny story about that is, he pulled up the Sunset Sound IR reverb, which is by IK Media, I think.
Yeah.
I've never
I think
actually
so.
got to use it myself, but now I'm pretty interested.
It's a T-Rex thing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, totally.
And he'd recorded a bunch of songs there, and he wanted to compare this reverb against his room mics that he'd recorded there. So he muted the piano room mics, loaded up this plugin, and put up that exact studio's IR, and it sounded like the exact same to him, he said. And then it turned out they used like his miking setup to make the IR. So it's like, just like, of course it sounds the same.
Yeah.
But it's cool that it kind of proves that IRs work, which I think we all know by now.
Yes.
But so that whole masterclass was just awesome and kind of made me like want to get back in the studio with just like an amazing band all together playing. It's just a unique way of capturing things if you get it right.
That's right. I agree. Yeah.
What I also found very interesting, and he explained that in the exact masterclasses, he talked about delays and that he did some Disney cartoon stuff. And he said, when you think about creating tension in some cartoons, what music do you hear? It's like a marching snare. And that's how you can think of delays. I've never thought about that.
Yeah.
Going after emotion.
Totally.
He's good at what he does. Yeah. But it's some great work.
Yeah.
What about you, Benny?
For me, it's been a couple of things actually. So back to Warren Hewitt, it's like it's been the third time now that we've done something in person with him. So second time for you, but like I was at NAM where I was. So and then we had him on the podcast three times now. So it feels kind of normal and natural now to just do stuff with him and the team and Kasia, his wife.
And we just had that chat with him as well today on the Gear stage, did a workshop with him. So it's like, we've done a lot with Warren all of a sudden.
Exactly. And that's that's part of what's fascinating about this event, if I think about it now, is that it feels so normal and natural, and we look forward, like you would look forward to meeting anyone you know or a friend or something. And it's kind of surreal to think that like when you, like even 3 or 4 years ago, if you had told me that we would be on a stage next to Warren Hewitt talking about whatever in front of an audience at a conference, like that would have been completely out of reach, or like I would never have believed it. And the fact that we got there is fascinating to me and feels good, and is just, I'm very grateful for that.
It's fun.
Totally. And then the other thing is I'm totally grateful for Mark and Klaus and the people doing this event for trusting us, for inviting us, because now we're providing a lot of value to them, to be fair, that's clear. But in the beginning, when we started out, we didn't have a huge audience or anything, but they still thought there's something cool about what we do. And so they invited us to this event, let us use the studio sofa, and let us create content for them. Then we obviously did something right there, because they wanted us wanted to have us again, and now even gave us slots on the stage. And so I'm very glad and grateful for those people like trusting us and giving us this chance. Similar with like the guys from Elysia who just said, let's do a talk together with presenting our gear. They didn't know me, so I could have totally ruined it also for them. Like they just let a stranger do a talk about their gear on stage and trusted me, and it worked out well. But again, somebody took a chance, and I'm very grateful for that. It's a lot of gratitude, honestly. Just like I said before, you guys being here doing this with me, it's also not. I don't take this for granted, because like not everyone, like most people don't have a team. They do it on their own and can't do the things that I can because of you guys. And so you trusting and believing in this whole thing and doing this with me means a lot as well. So it's mainly gratitude and kind of a surreal feeling in a way, in a good way. And then the final thing I want to say is, and that's also part of that same conversation, is that people from our syndicate, from the coaching community, came to this event. And so there was Michael from Germany, but also not like next to Hamburg. He had quite the travel to get there. There was Dazani from the Netherlands. He came there for just one day to be part of the show, and then drove back to the Netherlands, a long train ride, and he just wanted to be there. And I kind of felt almost like responsible for like giving them, making sure they have a good time. But then Dazani told me like, he literally said like, I'm next to greatness, because Dom Ravinius was sitting next to us, who's worked on these major records, and he totally enjoyed being there. And I think it's fantastic that those people come here to meet us and to be part of this. Clint was there from Hamburg, part of the syndicate as well. I hope I don't forget anyone. But those three for sure. And this is just the coolest part for me. And of course there was tons of value. I've learned so much from our podcast that we did, and from our, like every time the questions from the audience, like you always learn. So lots of gratitude, great new connections. And I'm looking forward to what's coming from that, because I bet that there will be more that we'll be doing with Elysia. Yeah. We'll be doing more with Warren. We'll be doing more with the Studioszene guys. And
I think you brought up a good point talking with Dasani and what he got out of going there. And I think that's something we can segue so that this episode actually has some value for our listeners beyond just, a recap of what's up, what we've been doing for the last 3 days. But is like, should you be going to these things? Should you be finding conferences and networking events in your niche, in your world? Be that band meetups, be that trade shows with just a bunch of gear to look at and drool over, or instrument workshops, stuff like that. I would venture to guess that every person at this table would say hell yes, probably in different words, but
definitely,
Probably
yes.
yes.
I would say that.
It's just because, like with Dom, who's worked on Taylor Swift and big K-pop albums and stuff like that, he's killing it. For Dasani to get to network with him and just learn from him, chat shop with him. Addy was also there.
Addy actually did helped Dasani a lot, I think, right? I didn't hear that conversation, but I think
they had
we
a great
connected
chat.
them
I think, but like for you and I, we've met and chatted with these people a few times now. So I don't think we realized how cool it is as much as Dasani did, and it was like, oh, right, this is amazing. We're having lunch with these really amazing people that are doing super cool things and trying to do even cooler things. We're in the right circle here. So highly recommend. And a year ago we had never met these people, and it was because we went to this that we met all of these people who we've now worked with on multiple things.
It's actually wild totally right. It's actually wild that all of this began with last year's Studioszene, because that's where we met Warren for the first time. Like, Warren was on the podcast before, but because he was going to be on our podcast at Studioszene, we did the in advance podcast. So that's where it all started. Then we met Dom, which was totally random. Last year's Studioszene, he was not a speaker. He was not on the what do you say, on the menu?
He was just attending. On the menu sounds great.
But like, he ran into us, pitched me his plugins. I had no idea who he was, and I was like, yeah, all right, a little skeptical. But then it turned into this like great partnership now with his plugins. They did a masterclass for us. Then we met again, and it's only the beginning still. And then Addy, of course, who connected us with so many people. Mm-hmm. And you're right. All of that started with last year's Studioszene actually, and now it's one step further where now we have people that we can connect with, Addy or these,
right?
Like it's really cool. And Addy did it again this time. He connected us with Olaf and a couple of others.
Like, as a networking machine, it's just the most positive dude in the world. It's amazing.
Yeah, totally.
I have something to say here.
Do it.
Because like a little bit before, we were talking about the fact that years ago when you went to this Musikmesse thing, you went there and you didn't talk to anyone.
It was completely pointless.
It didn't make sense. So I think that if I were to do that, that would happen to me, like totally. So like, what would you recommend for someone like me or you in the past to do in that situation?
Good question. And I can tell you, because when I'm with you and when there's a schedule and we're officially on the menu, like part of the thing, it's easy because, then you have at least some people and they can connect you to others. So it's way easier that way, of course. But I can tell you, because this year at NAMM, where I was alone, I didn't have you guys and I didn't have any official thing to do there. I was just a visitor. So with that, like, I thought, okay, I don't want this to be the same as in Frankfurt a couple years ago, where I don't do anything and it's pointless. And so I thought, what can I do about this? I'm not as shy anymore as I was back then. So that helps, of course, just to overcome the fear of like talking to people. But that's not all of it. I was really afraid that I would do the same thing. And so what I've done is I've created an actual kind of agenda, and I reached out to people before the event. So what I did is I looked at all the vendors. I looked at people who went there in the past, other producers, content creators, all the people that might potentially be there. And then like months in advance, like 2 or 3 months in advance, I just started messaging and emailing all of them. And I started with the ones where there was some kind of mutual friend or connection or whatever. But then I even went to the ones that have no idea who I might be. And then I just messaged them and I was like, hey, are you going to NAMM? And then they said yes. I was like, I'd love to meet you because of this or that. And for me, it was easy in some ways because I can always offer value by inviting people on to the podcast, because I can start the conversation by, I'd love to meet you because you would be a great guest for the show, which is a good door opener. But even without that, just messaging people, most of them are really open to just meeting people. And doing it right then and there might be intimidating, and I might have not done it maybe, but being prepared, reaching out in advance and scheduling meetings basically helped a lot. That's what I would have done. And when I got there, I already had a calendar full of meetings just because I've done that work before. And then also there's this, the thing is, when you go to an event like that, everybody's there for the same reason. Outside of these events, when you meet someone just over lunch or dinner or a party or whatever, they're not always into networking and business stuff and all that, and it's more difficult. But when you know they're going to an event like this, it's not weird to ask for a meeting, because that's why everybody's there. That's the whole point of these conventions. So if you just ask for their time, if they have them, they usually say yes, because they also want to connect. So that's my long answer to this. It helps to be prepared, and that's what I did at NAMM, and it worked really, really well. And also, once you get the ball rolling and you met the first couple of people, what then happens is that they typically, when it works and there's some connection, they will introduce you to other people. And then before you know it, there's this snowball. It happened totally at NAMM. I was like, before I knew it, everyone would push me to the next person and introduce me to whatever. And all of a sudden I was part of it. To the point where you're sitting like next to Andrew Sheps and like asking him questions about, which is crazy, but yeah.
I'd have two things to add to that. The first one would be like just be very curious, and Benny and I have benefited from this a lot, because that is what the podcast really is. When we're at a thing like this, we're being curious about people that we're talking to and bringing onto the show. So they have a story to tell, and just being very curious in that story builds a relationship. And it, like, a lot of people love to talk about themselves, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's not at all. It's a natural thing. And like, that's a really easy way to start a conversation with anybody. It's like, how the heck did you end up here, kind of thing, right? And you know, that can look like so many different things, but that's exactly how we connected with Addie originally. Is a fascinating story. And then Addie's introduced us to so many people as a result. It's been great. The next one still actually ties into Addie, but it ties back into Dasani as well. So Dasani, to give him a shout out, has this really cool plan of getting like a van recording studio and being able to go into communities and offer recording to communities that might not have any other options to do something like that. Such a cool idea, but it's like a very traveling kind of scenario, a studio scenario, which is so rad. And Addie is like known as the traveling producer. Like these Hit the Road Studios, that's his whole thing. So I went up to Addie, knowing this about Dasani, and said, you should meet this guy. He's like got this crazy cool plan to travel and produce music out of like a production van. And Addie's face lit up. Like, he could not have been more thrilled to talk to somebody about that. Like, he was interested in Dasani's story, right? So it's like, you can be curious in somebody's story, but you can also have a really interesting story and not even realize that it's like, I don't think Dasani really realizes how cool what he's trying to do really is.
It really is.
Yeah. So it was just like sit them down in front of each other, and they got it from there. They're gonna have a great chat.
Totally. Just so, because we talked about him, and I love the idea of giving him a shout out. Just so you guys know, I'm going to put the links in the show notes, but if you want to look up what Dasani does and who he is, you can look him up on Instagram. His profile is Official Flow Motion. Just go that one word, Official Flow Motion. That's Dasani's artist profile. And a good point. Instead of, like, I should have said that when you reach out to those people in advance, instead of then asking immediately for something you want, of course, it's way better to ask them about their stuff. Like, that's the thing. With having an agenda, I didn't mean having something that you want to get out of it, but having a plan of like which people you want to meet. But that's about it. Like, I didn't go into it wanting anything out of it. The whole goal was just to meet people, and that's it. Get a foot in the door, start the conversation, and then be able to follow up later, or if the opportunity comes up right then and there. But even if it's just a quick conversation and then it ends, it's still good, because then I can still reach out later. And very important. But like you said, most people love to talk about themselves and their projects. And so, that is, and sometimes you'd be surprised, like Kornev, for example, the Kornev guys. Dan Kornev is a very well-known producer, worked on very big records, has a plugin company. They sent out a newsletter telling people that they're at NAMM, and they even said, like, if you want to meet us, let us know. We'll be there, basically. And I bet that there's a lot of people on this list. I bet that many people just didn't do that for whatever reason. And I immediately replied and I was like, yeah, I'm there. I'd love to meet you. And then they sent me, they asked me to send my number. Kornev sent me a text, told me where he is, basically where they are. And then we met and had a great chat, and that led to the podcast and the plugin deals and all of that. So very easy opportunity. Like, so many people are on this newsletter, and all you need to do is reply and actually take that opportunity and say, yes, I want to meet you. And then you can meet Dan Kornev. Like, sometimes it's that easy, you know?
Totally.
So, it's fascinating.
I have a friend that gives me heck. I think he calls it a resume pitch. And it's for scenarios like these where you are trying to make a connection and sometimes you don't have a lot of time to do that. And people can get a little fatigued meeting people after person. So sometimes it's better just to be painfully blunt about who you are if you have something that's like could be perceived as valuable to them. So Dom, being a prime example, should have walked up and been like, hey, I'm Dom. I worked on a Taylor Swift track. Be like, okay, sit down. I've got questions. You know?
Exactly.
And anybody would be thrilled to talk to him about that.
Yeah.
And that in the entire conference hall, they all would have wanted to, right? So if you have something like that, like, for example, I'm really good at pitching Benny when Benny's awful at pitching himself. I'm like, Benny mixes over 250 songs a year, which is just fucking mind-blowing. It's incredible. But
to be fair, Thomas and I are mixing that. It's really co-mixing at this point.
For sure. But it's like that gets people to turn the light bulb on and be like, wait, who's talking to me? You know, because it's an incredible thing to be able to do.
Yeah, you're right. But there is something about, I don't know.
You have to be careful.
Yeah, sure, of course. And also there's something fascinating about people who have, I think Dom is confident enough, but he, like, how do I say this? It's fascinating when you figure out later what that person's actually done, and then it's even more impressive because they didn't tell you. Like,
totally.
It's hard. It can go wrong because if people don't do the research, they'll never figure out. But in case of Dom, he introduced himself. He told me about some plugins that he makes, and he says, I'm a K-pop producer. I personally don't care that much about K-pop, you know, like I mean, I shouldn't say that. I don't work in that. I think it's fascinating, but it's not my genre. Exactly. I think it's fascinating and I know a bit about it, but I don't work in that. So I was like, I don't know if that's relevant for me or I don't know who you are, but like, he was nice. So I had a conversation. But then I looked it all up and he didn't say much other than that. Like, he was just like, let's stay in touch and here we can have some licenses and try it out. He sends me licenses after the show. I do some research and I figure out, oh, it's not just him. It's him and Ken Lewis, like, who has 45 billion streams and a Grammy and 20 something number ones or whatever crazy numbers. And they've worked on Eminem and Alicia Keys and like whatever. And so I'm like, oh, that Dom guy is probably, he probably knows a thing or two. And then I realized, oh, he played drums on the latest Taylor Swift record and all these things, right? And that was even more impressive because I was like, that was the most normal dude ever. And he just walked up to me, asked me if I wanted to test the plugins, like no pressure. And then he walked off and he could have totally said those things and I would have been impressed. But, you know, the fact that I had to figure it out was also kind of impressive. So sometimes that, or like at NAMM, Greg, the engineer at Shangri-La, Rick Rubin's studio, where I was sitting next to that guy and talking to the people. And then somebody said, like, do you know who you're sitting next to? And I'm like, I have no idea. And then they told me that he's like the head engineer of like Shangri-La working at Rick Rubin's studio, right? And on crazy records and all of that. And like, he could have told me and I would have like, dozen questions. But he didn't. He was just a normal guy nerding out about audio, just like everybody else in the room. And that is also impressive. I don't know. It's like, goes both ways.
Yeah, there's kind of different moves. That's really all.
That's also something I learned. Like last year when we were here the first time, it was like, oh, this guy and this guy and this guy. But they all are just normal people and they are nice. And I think that can hold you back also from talking to people if you put them somewhere in the sky, you know?
Yeah.
Just say hi. Yeah. And if somebody replies in a not nice way,
Yeah.
You probably don't want to work with them anyways. Then,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Just turn
Might
around
even
and
make
walk
some
away.
people uncomfortable. Like if you think about Moritz Enders yesterday, I think he appreciated the fact that it was just a casual, normal conversation on the podcast. And once he realized that like we're not starstruck or it was just a normal conversation. He, I think, really enjoyed the conversation. But there's certain people I think they don't want all the hype all the time. You know, where it's just good to be normal.
Absolutely.
But yeah, back to the point, conferences are a good thing to attend, I think, if you talk to people.
Agreed.
Yeah. So a different point though, because I know that a lot of people go to these mainly not because of the people, but maybe because of the gear. And I was that person too. I went to my first sort of conference like that because I wanted to check out all the gear. That has completely changed for me. But like, how do you guys feel about that? Because I feel as much as I love that, I don't know. For me, it's more the people.
We talked about that earlier today, I think, right? Or was that you and I?
We did?
Well, I talked to one of you about how the gear doesn't really scratch the itch for me.
We did that.
In that.
Talked about that.
Yeah. Where I think probably like 8 years ago, I probably would have been like drooling on some of the things there, just like literally had to leave. But the people are fascinating to me now. But I think, for some people, that's not the case.
It's maybe different when you're about to build a studio or something like that.
Yes, totally.
And you like want to have a few preamps and a chain or for vocal recording or something, and you can try all that stuff in one room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's totally valuable.
Yeah.
But I think meeting people is also way more interesting for me.
I think when it comes to gear, it's again the people behind the gear that's interesting. That's where the gear thing becomes relevant for me, because I personally don't care as much about the companies that just are under this distribution umbrella and some guy or girl is there like represents the distribution. They don't really know anything about the gear really, or it's just a salesperson can answer the questions. Yeah, I'm not interested in that because I can look up that gear myself online. But companies like Audioscape, even though they weren't there themselves this time, but they had the flood and everything. So I totally understand that they don't travel to Europe now. But they do their best to be at these events, and it's their company, and you can reach out to them anytime. And even the people they choose to represent the gear know the gear and can answer your questions. So companies like that, or Elysia, where the people from Elysia are there themselves, or a session desk, where that's, I think, is valuable, because that companies like that, I trust them more after talking to the people behind the company. That helps me actually make decisions. So I was checking out studio, and I'm thinking about a new studio desk. Then Malcom connected me with the session desk owner, I think. I talked to him, and after talking to him, it was even more clear to me that I don't want to say I'm going to buy one because I haven't made the decision yet, but it's more likely now that I'm going to get one of these desks because I met the person. Same with Elysia. I love the gear already, but now I do even more because Stefan's such a great person and the whole team. And so I think that's valuable. And then and that way you also learn about the gear, because they will actually tell you things you might not have known. So I've learned stuff about even furniture that like, it's not a magic thing, but I've learned things about the desk that I didn't know.
Right.
Just by
what's
talking
possible. As far as customizing. Yeah. It's great.
So I think there's value, and I hope that more companies start doing that and put more, like, make it more personal, and the whole social aspect. Like, I hope that this becomes more important for companies, because I think they need to realize that you can order and try almost everything. You can look all the things up online, and if you want to add, if you want to provide any value beyond that, you gotta send someone there that's actually good at connecting with people, helping people, also good at selling their gear, and also good at like answering questions and all of that. And if you don't have that, there's almost no point in showcasing your gear there. So I hope more companies do that, and that also leads to better connections in the industry, because you can do content together. You can. People like us can explain the gear to their audience, and I don't do that with some distributor. I do that with the brands themselves, right? So they get in front of more people because we might do a video on something. It's just good for everybody. So I hope more brands would do that.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So
What else?
What
do you have
else?
to say?
Manel.
I've been talking so much at this event. Please take over. Whatever you have in mind.
I mean,
What kind
about the gear thing, like, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm not a gear nerd. So, because I think there's so much more value in other things involved in music that are not gear, like, I don't know, like the songwriting, production side of things. Like, gear is not gonna make your song better. If your song is bad, you know, you're gonna have a bad song that sounds good, but it's still a bad song.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not really super interested in the gear side, but I think it's as you said, it's interesting when you can talk to the the people who's been involved on making those pieces of gear, because you can tell how they appreciate what they've done. Like, they can tell you a lot of things that a distributor or someone who's not part of the process cannot really tell you. But besides that, I'm way more interested in the people than on the material things,
Yeah.
But sometimes if you buy new gear and it's not the gear itself, but the experience you have while you do your work with that gear just makes the process of your job so much more enjoyable. And that's really a thing that is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is true that I'm also talking from a position of, like, I've never had any gear besides my interface and my computer and stuff. So, I haven't experienced the other side of the thing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it can be fun for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all I have currently is a couple speakers, interface, computer as well. I'm very similar setup now, but I have been in the positions with racks of gear and it's been a blast. But actually, I don't know if it'll be out by the time this podcast is out, but we'll have the Moritz Enders chat, which is like all about his like entirely analog workflow, which is super fascinating. So that's a look into that world. For sure.
I mean, the stream video is already on the channel. The proper podcast video will be later, but you can check it out already, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting conversation to have for sure. It's like, if you want to do that, you totally can. And I think Moritz really proved to me that you can do it quite efficiently if you really want to as well.
Yeah. Brings up a good point, though, because if I think about Moritz versus you, for example, Manel, if you're going to an event like that, it makes sense to think about what you actually want to do and who you are and what your work is. Because if I'm a mix engineer like Moritz and I get hired to make production sound really good and people know me for like technical stuff that I can do really well. I mean, he's creative for sure as well, but also he's very into that. And like, he's probably more interested in gear than you are because of the work he's doing. But like you, who are I perceive you as a very creative person, more a musician, songwriter, artist. Of course you can produce an engineer, but the song is always more important to you. And when you, even the fact that you say, I don't really care that much about gear, you haven't researched it that much, it's like, you're not that much of a nerd. The music is more important to you. You spend more time working on the music, right? So if that is you, then I think the stories and anecdotes and things that Warren Hewitt says or other people are way more valuable to you, where it's about the artist, the experience of working with artists, all that kind of stuff, than any of the gear talk. So, it's like, and I'm not saying Moritz is not interested in music. He's definitely a music fan. I'm just saying there's more technical and less technical people. And when I started out, for example, I was very technical. So when I was as far into my career as you are right now, I would go to these events only because of the gear. And I was a musician myself too, but I'm also such a nerd and such a technical person that I did lots of research on all of this stuff. And so everyone's different there. But then I realized that it is less important. And but still, and all I'm saying is, it's interesting that you don't even care about that much, and for other people it might be more relevant.
Yeah, but the thing is that what I'm thinking is, I mean, for example, why would I care about this super expensive microphone if I cannot get it like ever? Like,
Yeah, I mean for example, I was in the same spot. I didn't have any money, and I just was interested in that, but I just had the goal and the plan of building a studio. And so which is not what I recommend, listeners, but I borrowed a bunch of money and bought gear because I thought that's what I need to do. I want my own studio. And so there was a high like interest, like, and it's the right thing to do. If your goal is to build a recording studio, then you should be interested in gear, I think, because then you need more of that. But if the goal is to make great music and work from home and do remote work, and like, it's a different thing. So I was interested in gear because my dream was to build a recording studio. I didn't have money. So I was just like, yeah, let's borrow some money and it will somehow work out. Not really a plan. But so you know, you get what I'm saying? The goal is you can also be strategic about building a studio, make it work. But the point is, what's the goal? Again, like, are you going there because your goal is to build a studio? Then you better check out all the gear, talk to all the vendors and get deals and whatever, and figure out the best way to do that. If your goal is to work from home and make music and write music or produce, then maybe skip the gear part and only get the stuff that you really need, but then focus on the people, the connections, the stories of how to work with bands and all of that. So that's what I'm actually trying to say. And Moritz Enders, for example, he definitely wanted to have a studio with an SSL and racks of expensive outboard gear and big speakers and all of that. So he had to do a lot of gear research probably, and he's just interested in that. But if your goal is not to have that, then why bother, right? So funny how that changes, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
it sure does.
That was all I wanted to do, honestly. Like
Get gear?
Yeah, 10, 15 years ago, I saw my favorite producers. I saw Kurt Ballou was my favorite producer back then, or other people. And all I saw was like, they have cool studios and great gear. And I thought there's one way, and that is get gear, build a studio.
Get as much as possible.
Yeah, and then people will come and you
The
record.
bigger, the better.
Yeah, and you record bands all the time. That's like that's the only thing I knew. I didn't know that there's people doing remote work from a laptop or whatever like that.
Yeah. And it's changed so much with technology and stuff. It's
Totally. And also, I didn't know that long term, that's not the life that I want to live. Also, like, as much fun as it was to have bands in the studio and produce, and I did that all of that. But then at some point, I also realized I don't want to live with bands all the time. Right? Everyone's different.
Yeah. And your career seems to change shape over time as well.
I'm a completely different person than you are. I always was like, get a decent computer, a small, very good quality interface, a good pair of headphones. And that's it.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, totally.
Totally different.
Yeah.
But you work at a studio, so there's kind of the gear's already available. Does that?
I mean, not anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. No,
Depends on what you're doing. Right?
Yeah, totally.
Do a lot of recording.
Yeah.
A lot of channels.
I mean, when you came in, it was available, and we did the occasional like recording project, and you spent more time in the control room. But then over time, you did more editing and programming and all of that. I did my mixing. I used the gear less and less, and then eventually sold a lot of it. So right now, both of us have pretty minimal setups, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also funny because for a while, a lot of good gear was available at my studio, and we never used it. It really, like, it's really like that. We never used it.
Great, though.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I had Neumann microphones in boxes and never
Julia
used
said the same thing today, right?
Oh yeah, it's true. Yeah, I had racks full of like expensive stuff. I sometimes said to Thomas, like, I feel bad. I'm starting to feel bad every day looking at this and never turning it on. It's like,
Yeah. You made the right choice then, I think.
yeah, totally.
Well, should we grab dinner?
I think so.
Yeah. Recording dinner.
Let's take the podcast on the road.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope there was value in this episode still. It was not as high energy as usual. I think we're like a little, tired. Yeah, but also in a good way. And so, but yeah, thank you if you made it this far, thank you for listening to this and watching this if you're watching on YouTube. And yeah, I guess we'll see you next time. If you want to follow, I should say one thing. If you want to see some of the things that we've been talking about this event, you can go to my Instagram, both the Self-Recording Band or my personal Instagram, and you'll find highlights there with all the stories that we grabbed over those 3 days. Manel did a fantastic job of doing that. And so you can see like the highlights of every day and a little recap and like some reels, so you can see what we're actually talking about here. You're going to see videos on YouTube that we've done. You're going to see podcast episodes and hear podcast episodes. You can already watch at least one video on Warren Hewitt's channel, Produced Like a Pro, where there's almost our entire interview in his video. So you can see that. And thanks again for listening. And I hope I'll see you someday on one of these events, and then we get to chat.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
There you have another quick whatever clip you can post.
You're killing me, Wa.
What just happened? Like what's happening right now is a clip that you can post because other people might enjoy it as much as I do.
But do you mean
not.
he's recording already?
I think so.
Are you recording? Yeah, you are.
Yeah.